Hi friends, political science is one of the important subject for all the government examinations. Even in EPFO that is conducted by UPSC, you can get up to 6 to 7 questions directly from Laxmikanth book. Even in all the government examinations, if you consider any state PSC examination or any of the government examination from group D to group A, you will get maximum questions from Laxmikanth, that is Indian Polity by M Laxmikanth. So today we are going to start a series on political science, and first chapter we will be dealing with making of the constitution. Although the first chapter is the historical background in M Laxmikanth, but we will deal it nearer to the EPFO examination so that you can remember the provisions that are provided in the acts that were ruled out by the colonial rule, that is British government. So we will be starting the political science series from the second chapter, that is making of the constitution. For your information, we have already started the general principle of accounting. The first video has been covered, and we have covered the two video lectures of social security in India, which plays a big role for your selection in the EPF examination. So do watch those videos from our playlist on the YouTube channel, and for further updates do subscribe and press the bell icon of the channel. So let's start the video on the making of the constitution. Here in this we will deal with when did the constitution concept emerged in India, when was the making of the constitution emerged in India, who proposed the constitution idea, and in which year it was adopted. In this complete series, we will be completely covering the political science which is required from the examination point of view. So now we can start the second chapter, that is making of the constitution. The first concept is demand for a constituent assembly. When did this demand emerged? When the idea that the constitution assembly should be formed for the free independent India was emerged. It was for the first time in 1934. The Communist Party pioneer, that is nothing but the veteran M. Roy, the pioneer of Communist Party M. Roy, demanded or put forward for the first time that there should be a constituent assembly for independent free India. Then in 1935, Indian National Congress for the first time officially demanded the constituent assembly to be frame the constitution of India. Why should constitution assembly is required? To frame the constitution of India. What is constitution? It is nothing but the set of laws that are guided for the government, for the legislature, for the judiciary, and for the public, that will describe the rights of the public. This is nothing but the constitution. Again in 1938, Jawaharlal Nehru put forward the concept of the constitution of free India must be framed without outside interference, that is with sovereign power. What is sovereign? Sovereign is nothing but it should be formed without the influence of the external aid. With only the internal factors it should be formed. It should be formed on the self-independent, that is sovereign. Jawaharlal Nehru in 1938 put forward the constitution of free India must be framed without outside interference by a constituent assembly elected on the basis of adult franchise. What is the adult franchise? It is nothing but the right to vote. In India, right to vote is for the persons who are eligible, that is above the age of 18 years. Next, the demand was finally accepted. This demand was finally accepted in principle by the British government in what is known as August Offer. This is important. What is known as August Offer. In August Offer, the Jawaharlal Nehru's demand was accepted in August Offer. When did August Offer was in India? It was in 1940. Again in 1942, Sir Stafford Cripps, a member of cabinet, came to India with a draft proposal of the British government on the framing of an independent constitution to be adopted after the World War II. When was the World War II? If you know the answer, do comment in the comment section. Then the Cripps proposal, that is in 1942, it was headed by Sir Stafford Cripps, hence it was called as Cripps proposal. It was rejected by the Muslim League. Why? Why Muslim League rejected the Cripps proposal? As Cripps proposal was on the favor of not dividing the India, whereas the constitution of the Pakistan was in the need of dividing the India, one as India and the other as Pakistan, the separate province for the Muslims. Finally, a cabinet mission in 1946. The Cripps proposal was in 1942. Cabinet mission was in 1946. It was sent to India. While it rejected the idea of two constituent assemblies, do remember this point. The cabinet mission of 1946, it rejected the idea of two constituent assemblies. It put forth a scheme for the constituent assembly which more or less satisfied the Muslim League. That means the cabinet mission of 1946 was accepted by the Muslim League. Then, if at all the constitution was accepted, that is, the constituent assembly was accepted, then how was its composition? The composition of the constituent assembly. The constituent assembly was constituted in November 1946. Remember this month as well as year. It was in November 1946 that the constituent assembly was constituted under the scheme formulated by cabinet mission. When did the cabinet mission emerged in India or came to India? Do comment in the section. Then the features of the schemes were, what are the features of the cabinet mission? The total strength of the Constituent Assembly was set to be 389. Remember these numbers. It was said to be 389. Of these, 296 seats were to be allotted to the British India and 93 seats to the princely states. Out of 296 seats, again in 296 seats allotted to the British India, 292 members were to be drawn from the elective governor provinces and four from four chief commissioner provinces. How many chief commissioner provinces were there? There were four chief commissioner provinces, one from each. Then second feature was each province and princely states were to be allotted a set seats in proportion to their respective population. Roughly one seat was allotted for every 1 million population. That means if at all there is a population of 1 million, one person will be representing those 1 million population. This was the second feature of the cabinet mission plan. Then third feature, seats allocated to the British provinces were to be divided among the three principal communities. First one Muslim, second Sikhs and general. All except Muslims and Sikhs were nothing but general in proportion to their population. Do remember these communities which were divided in the cabinet mission. One was Muslim, second was Sikh and third was general, as these questions will be asked in the examinations. The fourth feature was the representatives of each community were to be elected by the members of that community in the provincial legislative assembly, and voting was to be by the method of proportional representation by means of single transferable vote. How was the means of voting? It was nothing but by a single transferable vote, that is proportional representation by means of single transferable vote. The fifth feature was the representatives of the princely states were to be nominated by the heads of the princely states. From this, we get to know that the Constituent Assembly was to be a partly elected body and partly nominated body. So it was not completely a elected body, but it was partly a nominated body as well as partly an elected and partly nominated body. See, the elections to the Constituent Assembly of 296 was allotted to the British India provinces were held in July-August 1946. When was the elections held in pre-independence India? It was in July-August 1946. The Indian National Congress won 208 seats and the Muslim League 73 seats. Don't remember these numbers as these are not required for the examinations. So we can move further. This is the important point. If at all you are going to write the mains examinations, do by heart these sentences as these will be useful in writing the mains. See, although the Constituent Assembly was not completely elected by the people of India on the basis of adult franchise, the Assembly comprised representatives of all sections of Indian society, such as Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Parsi, Anglo-Indians, Indian Christians, SC, STs, including women of all these sections. So, women were also involved in selecting or electing the peoples for the Constituent Assembly. The assembly included all important personalities of India at that time, with the exception of Mahatma Gandhi. That means the Constituent Assembly did not involve Mahatma Gandhi. This is the important point to be remembered from the examination point of view. Mahatma Gandhi was not a representative or a part of the Constituent Assembly. So, how did the Constitution Assembly was working? How was it working? Working of the Constituent Assembly. The Constituent Assembly held its first meeting. This is important to remember. When was its first meeting? First meeting on December 9, 1946. Constituent Assembly's first meeting was on December 9, 1946. The Muslim League boycotted the first meeting and insisted on a separate state for Pakistan. Did the Muslim League participated in the first meeting of the Constituent Assembly? Not at all. The Constituent Assembly held its first meeting on December 9, 1946, but the Muslim League boycotted. That means it didn't participated. It rejected the Constituent Assembly and it did not participated in the Constituent Assembly's first meeting, and it held on its own stand that it should require or it requires the separate land called Pakistan. The meeting was thus attended by only 211 members. Dr. Sachidanand Sinha, the oldest member, was elected as the temporary president. This is important. Dr. Sachidanand Sinha was elected as a temporary president of the assembly following the French practice. Which was the practice used? It was the French practice. The French practice was used and Dr. Sachidanand Sinha was elected as a temporary president for the Constituent Assembly. Later, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, this is important, Dr. Rajendra Prasad was elected as the president of the Assembly. And do remember, at the initial stage of the Constituent Assembly, there were two vice presidents for India. One was H.C. Mukherjee and second was V.T. Krishnamachari. This was the question asked in some of the state PSC examinations. So do remember these names. H.C. Mukherjee and V.T. Krishnamachari were elected as the vice presidents of the assembly. In other words, the assembly had two vice presidents. So how many vice presidents were there for Indian Constituent Assembly? It was two vice presidents were there for the Indian Constitution Assemblies. Moving on December 13, 1946, this date is very very important. Do remember this date. December 13, 1946, Jawaharlal Nehru moved the historic objective resolution in the assembly. It laid down the fundamental and philosophy of the constitutional structure. It laid down the fundamental and philosophy of the constitutional structure. What was it? It was nothing but the objective resolution. When was the objective resolution? It was on December 13, 1946. The second question may be, who introduced the objective resolution? It was by Jawaharlal Nehru. Okay, it was by Jawaharlal Nehru on December 13, 1946. Objective resolution was moved, and what it lays down? It lays down the fundamentals and philosophy of the constitutional structure. Some of the important points are: first one, the Constitution Assembly declares its firm and solemn resolve to proclaim India as an independent, sovereign republic and to draw up for the future governance of the Constitution. The second point read that for the Constitution, as of now, India, its whole territory, if at all the further territories that are going to be occupied by India or that are willing to join India will remain a part of India. This is the second point that deals. Then the third point, the said territories, whether their present boundaries or which such others as may be determined by the Constituent Assembly and thereafter according to the law of the Constitution, shall possess and retain the status of autonomous units together with residuary powers and exercise all powers and functions of the government and administration, save and except such powers and functions as are vested in or assigned to the Union or inherent or implied in the Union or resulting therefrom. The simple meaning of this sentence is nothing but the territories that are willing to be a part of India will be autonomous. That means they have their own provisions. These are already provided in Schedule 7 of the Indian Constitution. what schedule 7 of the Indian Constitution, where there is a union list, there is a state list, as well as there is concurrent list. Okay, the separate list will enforce the complete powers, completely separated powers for the union. The state have their own powers, concurrent list have their own powers. The simple meaning of the sentence is nothing but the states have their own powers and the center will not interfering in the state's powers, and state legislature will have full authority to make its own law legislations as well as any of the forms that has been implied in the schedule 7 of the constitution. Fourth point, wherein all power and authority of the sovereign independent India, its constituent parts and organs of the government are derived from the people. It's important. The constituent parts and organs of the government, from where those are derived, it are derived from the people. See, the fifth point is very important as it will lead to the complete body of the present preamble of the India. Fifth point, wherein shall be guaranteed and secured to all the people of India justice, social, economic, and political equality of status of opportunity and before the law, freedom of thought, expression, belief, faith, worship, occasion, association, and action, subjected to the law of public morality. If at all you are not clear about these words, don't worry, in the upcoming future lecturers, we will be covering the exact meaning, the definition that has been provided in the preamble. The further third or fourth lecturer will be dealing with these, so don't worry if at all not getting these points. Sixth, wherein the adequate safeguards shall be provided for minorities, backward and tribal areas, and depressed and other backward classes. The eighth point is the ancient land attains its rightful and honored place in the world and makes its full and willing contribution to the promotion of the world peace and the welfare of the mankind. The resolution was unanimously is nothing but without any opposition. The resolution was unanimously adopted by the Assembly on January 22, 1947. When was the resolution adopted? That is objective resolution. It was moved on December 13, 1946, but it was adopted on January 22, 1947. It influenced the eventual shaping of the constitution. It influenced the eventual shaping of the constitution through all its subsequent stages. Its modified version forms the preamble of the present constitution. Which is the base for the present constitution? Present preamble, it is nothing but the objective resolution. The modified version forms the preamble of the present constitution. What are the changes by the Independence Act? In 1947, British moved out from India, and at the final they released an act called India Independence Act of 1947, and it made some of the great changes in the Indian present situation. The representatives of the princely states who had stayed away from the Constituent Assembly gradually joined it on April 28, 1947. Representatives of 6 states were part of the assembly after the acceptance of the Mountbatten Plan of June 3, 1947. Remember that Mountbatten Plan is also called as June 3 Plan. June 3 Plan is also called as Mountbatten Plan. Mountbatten was the first Governor General of the independent India. See, for a partition of the country, the representatives of most of the other princely states took their seats in the assembly. The assembly was made a fully sovereign body. Assembly was made a fully sovereign body which could frame any constitution it pleased. The act empowered the assembly to abrogate or alter any law made by the British Parliament in relation to India. This was the main feature of the Independence Act. It also ruled that even you can repeal the Independence Act of 1947, and this is the point that deals with. You can read it. The act empowered the assembly, that is, it made the assembly, it gave the power to the assembly to abrogate, that is, to remove or to change or alter any law made by the parliament in relation to India. The assembly also became a legislative body. See, Constituent Assembly also acted as a legislative body. This is important point. Before independence, which body acted as a legislative body? It may be asked as a question. It was nothing but the Constituent Assembly acted as a legislative body. In other words, two separate functions were assigned to the Assembly, that is, making of the Constitution for Free India and enacting of ordinary laws for the country. These two tasks were to be performed on separate days. See, Constituent Assembly has two functions. One is to prepare the constitution for independent India, and second to make ordinary laws, that is to act as a legislative body. Thus, the assembly became the first parliament of free India, where whenever the assembly met as a constituent body, it was chaired by Dr. Rajendra Prasad. It was chaired by Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and when it met as a legislative body, it was chaired by G.V. Mavlankar. G.V. Mavlankar. When it was as an constituent body, it was chaired by Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and when it was to be acted as a legislative body, it was chaired by G.V. Mavlankar. These two functions continued till November 26, 1949, when the task of making constitution was over. So here is the question: when did the task of making the constitution was over? It was on November 26, 1949. It was on November 26, 1949. The making of constitution task was over by the Constituent Assembly. Although the Constituent Assembly continued as a legislative body until the new new legislation was formed by an election in 1951 and 52. Here is the main point: the Muslim League members withdrew from the Constitution Assembly for India. Consequently, the total strength of the assembly came down to 299 as against 389, as 389 was the initial strength when the cabinet mission plan came to India. It was the proposal of the cabinet mission that there should be 389 members for the Constituent Assembly. But at this stage, Muslim League withdrew from the Constituent Assembly, and hence 389 was reduced to 299. It is important. Other functions performed. What were the other functions that were performed by the Constituent Assembly? You should remember these in the chronological order as in the questions. They may ask you to arrange in a chronological pattern. So we will remember it in the chronological orders. See, in addition to making of the constitution and enacting of ordinary laws, the Constituent Assembly also performed the following functions. What were the functions? First is, it adopted the national flag on July 22, 1947. I am dictating you it in a chronological order, so it will be easy for you to remember it in a chronological order. So the Constituent Assembly adopted the national flag on July 22, 1947. Therefore, on July 22, we celebrate it as a National Flag Day. National flag was designed by Pingali Venkaya. Remember this name, as this has been asked in the examinations many times. The second, it ratified the India's membership of the Commonwealth in May 1949. It ratified India's membership of the Commonwealth in May 1949. It adopted the national anthem on January 24, 1950. Here is a trick you can remember: national anthem, national song, and election of the Dr. Rajendra Prasad as the first president of India. These all three events have took place on January 24, 1950. That is, it adopted the national anthem, it adopted the national song, and it elected Dr. Rajendra Prasad on January 24, 1950. Okay, so what is the chronological order? First one, What is first one? It is nothing but adoption of national flag on July 22, 1947. What is the second? It ratified the Commonwealth membership of India in 1949. What is the third point? It adopted national anthem, national song, and it elected Dr. Rajendra Prasad as the first president of India on January 24, 1950. This is very simple trick that you can remember, and you should compulsory remember or by heart these points. Here are some of the important points. In all, the Constituent Assembly had 11 sessions. It had completely 11 sessions over 2 years, 11 months and 18 days. Over 2 years, 2 years, 11 months and 18 days. Remember this, 2, 11, 18. 2 years, 11 months and 18 days. And it has referred to constitution of about 60 countries. The draft constitution was considered for 114 days. The total expenditure incurred on making the constitution amounted to 64 lakh. Just imagine the 64 lakh amount was at that time, that is in 1947 or 1946 to 1949. It's a huge amount if we consider it the present day. It is 64 lakh rupees. And it has referred to 60 countries' constitution. On January 24, 1950, the Constituent Assembly has held its final session. It, however, did not end and continued as the provincial parliament. Okay, it continued as the Provincial Parliament of India from January 26, 1950 to the formation of a new parliament after the first general election in 1951 and 52. First general election was held in 1951-52. Until then, the Constituent Assembly continued as the first parliament of the India or independent India or before India's independence. Okay. These are very important points. Committees of the Constituent Assemblies. What were the committees? There were eight major committees that the Constituent Assembly formed, and some of the minor committees. I will tell you which of the committees you should remember and their heads you should remember. Eight were major committees and others were minor committees. What are major committees? You should remember the completely eight major committees and their heads, who were the presiding head of the committees. Union Powers Committee was headed by Jawaharlal Nehru. Union Constitution Committee was headed by Jawaharlal Nehru. See, Union Powers Committee and Union Constitution Committee was headed by Jawaharlal Nehru, whereas Provincial Constitution Committee was headed by Sardar Patel. Union Constitution Committee was headed by Jawaharlal Nehru, whereas Provincial Constitution Committee was headed by Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. Then fourth, Drafting Committee was headed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. This is very, very important for all the examinations. Drafting Committee was headed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Then Advisory Committee on Fundamental Rights, Minorities and Tribally excluded areas. It was headed by again Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. See, this committee had the following 5 subcommittees. These are so important, but some of the importance in them are Fundamental Rights Subcommittee J.B. Kriplani, Minorities Subcommittee H.C. Mukherjee, Northeast Frontier Tribal Areas and Assam Excluded and Partially Excluded Areas Subcommittees Gopinath Bardoli, Excluded and Partially Excluded Areas other than those in Assam Subcommittee A.V. Thakkar, then Rules of Procedure Committee Rajendra Prasad, States Committee Jawaharlal Nehru. Here is the point everyone will confuse, as the state amalgamation was conducted by the mission was concluded and conducted by Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, but the states committee for negotiating with the states, it was presided or it was headed by Jawaharlal Nehru. So do remember, it was not Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, it was Jawaharlal Nehru. Then steering committee, again Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Okay. These are some of the minor committees. In that you should remember who was headed House Committee. It was Pattabi Sitaramaiah. Then who headed Ad Hoc Committee on Supreme Court? It was S. Varadachari, not an assembly member. Expert Committee on the Financial Provisions, that is Nalini Ranjini Sarkar. Linguistic Provinces Committee Commission SK Dhar. We will deal with this Linguistic Provinces Commission SK Dhar Commission in further upcoming sessions, as it is important because it led to the formation. SK Dhar, although he rejected the formation of states on the linguistic basis, but it led to the development of states on the linguistic basis in the further upcoming. There were many commissions that were appointed by the government of India, and that led to the formation of first linguistic state called Andhra Pradesh, then Karnataka. There were many states that have been formed on the linguistic basis. Then there was a special committee to examine the draft constitution. It was again Jawaharlal Nehru. Press Gallery Committee, Usha Nath Sen. Usha Nath Sen was the Press Gallery Committee. The important drafting committee, important in these committees is drafting committee, as this was the main committee that formed the constitution for free independent India. So who headed the drafting committee? Do comment in the section below. Among all the committees of the Constituent Assembly, the most important committee was drafting committee, set up on August 29, 1947. On August 29, 1947, the drafting committee was set up. It was this committee that was entrusted with the task of preparing a draft of the new constitution. It consisted of 7 members. You should remember all these 7 members' name, because these may be asked in the examinations. They were Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, N. Gopalaswamy Iyengar, Alladi Krishnaswamy Iyer, Dr. K.M. Munshi, Sayyid Muhammad Sadullah, N. Madhav Rao, and T.T. Krishnamachari. It's no need to remember these names. If you remember these 7 names, it's very important and it will be helpful for you in the examination, at least for the elimination purpose. The drafting committee, after taking into consideration the proposals of various committees, prepared the first draft of the Constitution of India, which was published in February 1948. First draft was published in February 1948. Enactment of the Constitution. After the drafting committee prepared its draft, then it was enacted. Although January 24 it finished the job, but it was enacted on the some other date. And what was its important, we will see it further. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar introduced the final draft of the Constitution in the Assembly on November 4, 1948. November 4, 1948, final draft was introduced. The Assembly had a general discussion on it for 5 days. How many days? For 5 days. The second reading started on November 15, 1948 and ended on October 17, 1949. During this stage, as many as 7,653 amendments were proposed and 2,473 were actually discussed in the Assembly. There is no need to remember all these points. I am just explaining it for your knowledge. See, draft constitution was declared as passed on November 26, 1949. It was on November 26, 1949, the draft constitution was declared as it is passed and received the signature of the members and the president. Out of 299 members, the assembly, only 284 were actually present. Only 284 were actually present on that day and signed the constitution. This is also the date mentioned in the preamble as the date on which the people of India in the Constituent Assembly adopted, enacted and gave themselves this constitution. Do remember this point, as it is the only one preamble in the world which mentions the date on which it has been enacted or adopted. Because there is none other preamble or constitution in this world which mentions the date on which it has been adopted. The constitution as adopted on November 26, remember it was adopted on November 26, 1949, contained a preamble, 395 articles and 8 schedules. The preamble was enacted after the entire constitution was already enacted. After the entire constitution was already enacted, then the preamble has been enacted. That means the constitution came first, then the preamble came. But preamble is the cover page of the constitution. It is nothing but the key entry, nothing but the key to the constitution. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the then law minister. Who was the law minister at that time? He was B.R. Ambedkar. Piloted the draft constitution in the assembly. He took a very prominent part in deliberations of the assembly. See, he is known as the father of the Constitution of India. Who is recognized as the father of the Constitution of India? It is Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Even he is known as the chief architect of the Constitution of India. He is also known as Modern Manu. There are three names: father of the Constitution of India, chief architect of the Constitution of India, and also known as Modern Manu. So, when was the enforcement of the Constitution? See, enforcement and adoption. It was adopted on November 26, 1949. But when it was enforced, some provisions of the Constitution pertaining to the citizenship, elections, provisions, parliament, temporary and transitional provisions, and short title contained Article 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 60 through 24 and some other articles came into force on November 26, 1949. That means when the constitution was adopted, it was not completely adopted. Some of the parts were came into enforcement, but not all the complete constitution was not enforced on November 26, 1949. See, the remaining provisions of the constitution came into force on January 26, 1950. On January 26, 1950, the complete constitution came into force. This day is referred to in the constitution as the date of its commencement and celebrated as the Republic Day. January 26, 1950 was selected as a day because there was a specific purpose or a reason for the selection of January 26 as a particular day for the enforcement of the constitution, because on January 26 itself it was on this day, that is January 26 in 1930, the Purna Swaraj, important, the Purna Swaraj was celebrated following the resolution of Lahore session. It was Lahore session, December 1929 of the Indian National Congress. Due to this declaration, January 26 was selected as a date for the enactment of the constitution or enforcement of the constitution. There are some criticism of the Constituent Assembly. There are some criticism of the Constituent Assembly. Many of the critics were it was not a representative body, as it was partly elected and partly nominated body. So it's a many critics said that it was not a representative body. It was not a sovereign body, because many of the thinkers say that it was prepared on the basis of cabinet mission. It was prepared on the basis of on the grounds of cabinet mission plan of 1946, and it was not on the independent thinking of the Indian constitution makers. So many of the thinkers say that it is not a sovereign body. It was time consuming. Naziruddin Ahmad, a member of the Constituent Assembly, coined a new name of the drafting committee. To show his contempt for it, he called it a drifting committee. Remember who called it a drifting committee? Constitution Assembly, which had a drafting committee. Naziruddin Ahmad called this drafting committee as a drifting committee. Then it many of the critics, that is Gravenel Austin called it a dominated by a Congress party. That is, it is essentially a one party country. Who said this as a one party country? It was Gravenel Austin. He said that it was one party country. It was a lawyer political domination. This was one of the again critics. It was dominated by Hindus. It was said by Lord Viscount Simon. Remember these names, because nowadays in the examination they are asking who said what. That is, if at all they give dominated by Hindus, it was a critics by who. They will give some other four names and you have to identify the correct name. It was Lord Viscount Simon who said that it was dominated by the Hindus. That is, cabinet mission or cabinet committee was dominated. Constituent Assembly was dominated by the Hindus. There are some of the important facts that should be read, that should be bited for the examinations, and we will be dealing with these important facts in the upcoming sessions. So, If you want to complete your polity within 1 month or in the span of little time, please do subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon for further notifications. Thanks for watching the video. Stay tuned. Thank you.